everyone, my name is Hashemi. I'm a content creator for Jetset Times, and welcome back to Deep Dive, the show where we discuss topics and issues in the travel industry that aren't nearly talked about enough. Today, we're going to be diving into disability traveling. Now, before we start this episode, I would just like to say that although I am able-bodied and recognize that privilege, this is just my small contribution to the disabled community. I'm in no way trying to speak for them, just raise some awareness for the struggles they go through while they're traveling. Instead, I humbly introduce Debra Kerper, founder of Easy Access Travel, an agency that specializes in accessible traveling. Debra, thank you so much for joining me today, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
My pleasure.
All right. So at the age of 29, you had a below the leg amputee, and then in 2016, you had your left leg amputated due to vascular problems. What was it like becoming a bilateral amputee, and how did that affect your traveling?
Well, it was a real game changer, just in terms of, my mobility, my ability to improvise and make things work. It did not affect my travel too much. The main thing it affected was travel to visit family. Mm-hmm. Because where I might be able to use, their bathrooms and things like that as a single amputee. Now being a bilateral, it was much more difficult. So that meant, staying at a hotel if I wanted to visit them, or steps became a lot more difficult for me. So if they had a lot of stairs, that was kind of not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So, but in terms of actual traveling, cruises, land trips, I really didn't miss a beat. So, just kept going. And,
that's great to hear.
I always have to put myself out there as an example to my clients. Mm-hmm. And, collected a few more interesting stories of things that happened.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, as you kind of just mentioned, getting into that, as the founder of Easy Access Travel, can you kind of explain how the agency began and what your mission is?
Sure. It began when 29 years ago, and I also have lupus, which is an anti-inflammatory disease, chronic. And I had gotten, pretty ill. I guess that was 1992. And my doctor said, you really shouldn't hold a full-time job or anything. And he put me out on disability, which went into long-term disability. And I was bored. I'm not a person to sit around. I have to have a purpose. So I saw a class being advertised. I thought, the local community college, this could fill a few hours, of my time. And the class said, want to travel the world? And I thought, sure. I didn't know how that was going to happen, but why not? So I signed up for this class, and there were a lot of people there, only to find out that it was the beginning class in a 2-year curriculum to be a travel agent. Wow. And the instructor actually said, let's find out why you're all here and, what your plans are. And so she started going around the room, and people are saying, well, I want to be able to work part-time. This is something I could possibly do from home. And I want to be able to travel at reduced costs, So I was listening very intently. And by the time it was my turn, I thought, this is something I could do. So I said, I want to also work part-time and work from home. And I am a below knee amputee, and I have some medical issues. I want to specialize in people with disabilities. So I put it out there, and then went to the library, found 3 or 4 books on the subject, and actually contacted the authors and started picking people's brains. How do I do this? What do I do? And made up my mind then that I could do this. I would do it very slowly and methodically, and never step outside of my knowledge that I was accumulating. I never wanted to put somebody's vacation in jeopardy. So as I learned, my horizons expanded. I found an organization that's unfortunately no longer up and running, but it was Society for Accessible Travel and Hospitality. And they would have yearly conferences with people from all over the world that had an interest in accessible travel.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to those conferences and I met a lot of wonderful people that I'm still in touch with today, believe it or not, that I learned from. And that really was the stepping stone to, my success.
Yeah. Well, it's great to hear that you, I guess, learned from other people. I think that's what we all try and do. Kind of a little on that. Although disability is so diverse and unique to every situation, do you feel that being disabled yourself has allowed you to kind of relate to your clients on a more personal level or understand them more?
Absolutely. Because not only, my disability, which is just, a small aspect of the field of disability, I've had so many surgeries and so much rehabilitation that it's exposed me to a lot of people with different and various disabilities. And so has going to, like I said, those conferences and just getting out there in the disabled community, which is what I did. I found out ways that I could participate, in a little bit of advocacy and just finding out, what was going on. But what being disabled has done to my business is huge, because other disabled people will trust you if you're living the life that they are. If you're having the same experiences and you have the same needs. When I say I understand what they're talking about and I know what a roll-in shower is, I know what these different pieces of equipment are, you can almost hear on the phone, their sigh of relief.
Because I guess from my perspective, although since I'm able-bodied, there's probably a lot of things when I travel that I don't necessarily have to think about that they do. For example, where the accessible entrances are there only stairs to a building? So you have all of that knowledge there, which is probably really comforting for them.
Well, see, that's one of the problems too, because somebody will call me up and say, I really, really want to go to Paris. Okay. But my neighbor just got home and they said, oh, there's no way you could do this trip. Well, because they're not seeing it through the proper eyes. They're seeing it, like you said, as an able-bodied person. But if they contact me, then I say, well, I understand that, but we have tour guides in Paris who understand accessibility, and they will get you into these venues a different way. My mantra is always just doing it differently. So we have to rely on experts to know how to do it differently and to show us. That's why it's real important, I think, that somebody with a disability, if they're going to embark on a major trip and spend a lot of money, they need to maybe spend a little extra and make sure they're using, the advice or the help of an expert.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really important to get an expert. I also love the idea of just doing it differently instead of focusing on the disabled part of it, but it's just a different way of moving around life, which I think is really important. And also, I've heard the phrase a lot, traveling should be inclusive, not exclusive. So I was just wondering what that means to you and kind of what that makes you think of.
Well, anything that's inclusive means that it's available to all. To everybody, regardless of their means of, getting around. So a little story about that. Back in, before ADA, so let's say maybe the early 80s, late 70s, there in the town I lived in Southern California, there was a gentleman who lived there that was a paraplegic, full-time wheelchair, power wheelchair. And he approached the mayor and said, let's make this city more inclusive. Let's make it disability friendly. And they started a mayor's committee on disability, and I joined that committee. Wow. And this They were trying to get curb cuts in. You know, at the end of every sidewalk when you cross the street, they wanted a little ramp, right?
Yeah.
Pretty commonplace nowadays. Well, the way they approached this was not because there was, you know, maybe 3 people in the town that used wheelchairs. They approached it from the viewpoint of moms or anybody pushing a baby stroller, people on bicycles. So making it, you know, oh yeah, we could really use that. People could relate to it.
Wow.
But of course, the end result was that a person in a wheelchair could get around a lot better. So you see, whatever works for the wheelchair user is really going to enhance the lives of everybody else.
Wow, that's so interesting to think that, like, although it's made for a wheelchair, there's also like so many other beneficial factors that come about that. I would have never thought that.
I could list a ton of things, you know, ramps. You know, anybody could have, you know, hurt their ankle, hurt their knee, hurt their hip, and doesn't want to do steps. Have a banister, have a ramp as an alternative. You know, so you're making it wheelchair friendly, but you're also making it easier for so many other people.
That actually reminds me, I know in the like this unprecedented time with COVID and everything, it's become a lot more common to press the handicap button and let the doors open for you so you don't have to touch as many surfaces. So that's just another way that now accessible architecture is being used and like to benefit so many other people that it initially wasn't meant for, but I guess wasn't exactly built for. So it's just interesting to see that kind of things.
That's an interesting comment because you can just use the side of your arm or your elbow to hit that button, right?
Yeah,
or
you can use anything.
And you don't have to touch it.
Exactly. So it's like preventing the spread and everything. And also kind of talking more about the clients when they come to, what are usually their main concerns when it comes to traveling?
They don't know how to do it. They want to do it. They don't know. I get this a lot. I just don't know where to start. And, you know, so I'll say, well, you start with me. You know,
that's a good answer.
I do what I call a lot of mental hand-holding. I don't meet the majority of my clients face-to-face because they're from all over the country. I love when I do get an opportunity to meet them. That's really special for me.
Yeah.
But we talk a lot. And there's fear because we all have fear of the unknown. And that is very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So I can explain to them not only from my experiences, but from other clients. And I always offer to put them in touch with different clients that I have that I know will be receptive to speaking to them. Because the more they hear it from somebody in their situation, the calmer they're going to be, and they're going to get excited. It's like, you know, well, if you can do it, I can do it. And I love, you know, having them go to my website and looking at pictures of all these different people experiencing the travel and experiencing life.
Yeah, it's like a little extra boost of confidence, so they're not as scared.
But I always, you know, I have to always respect their feelings. And of course. I understand them, you know? And the first time I traveled as a bilateral amputee, I had some fears too, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh, how's this going to happen? You know, I'll never try, especially, well, now with COVID, I'll never try to convince somebody, oh, come on, it's not that bad. That's not my place. Everybody has to do what they're comfortable with. Can I try and make them more comfortable and explain how things are? Yes. And then they have to, you know, form their own opinion.
And then going off of that, you've obviously worked with so many disabled clients, trying to make them comfortable, giving them these dream vacations. Is there any like one client or one memory that like you will always remember that is kind of a, this is why I'm doing this moment or story?
Yeah, there's actually a lot. The story of Glenn, the young man with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy,
Mm-hmm.
how he just wanted to be an architect and he wanted to build ships. And we got him to get a meeting with the architects from Royal Caribbean. And when he was on
Wow.
the ship, actually see the underbelly of the ship, which that was before 9/11, so that never happens anymore. But in better days, yeah, things like that. And then the other clients that really tug on my heartstrings and is really emotionally difficult are people with ALS, commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease,
Yeah.
which is really difficult. They are progressed downhill to the point where they're totally immobile, probably can't speak, but their brain stays so sharp.
Mm-hmm.
They're typically a little on the younger side, like in the prime of life, what you would call the prime of life, with career and children, usually like teenagers, and it's real hard. And I've planned a lot of last trips, memory making trips for these families. And I've been known to get off the phone and sit here and cry. So that's difficult.
I mean, that's very difficult, but such an amazing thing you're doing. I know my great uncle passed away from ALS when I was younger. So to hear that even the idea of a last trip is, it's fantastic.
Yeah,
and I'm sure they appreciate it so much.
And then, of course, there's all the people that we just explain to them, yeah, life's not stopping. Let's just show you how to do this differently and how you can still have a great, a great time. I did a trip a few years ago for a gentleman who became quadriplegic later in life, had a lovely wife and, family. And he was pretty good about it, but his wife was so scared,
Really?
scared. And I was on that trip with them because it was one of my groups to Europe. And she did so well, and I was so proud of her. And now this summer, they're signed up to go on an Alaskan cruise with one of my groups.
Wow.
And not only are they going, but they're bringing a lot of their extended family. So I'm really proud
That's
of that.
great. Yeah, that's great. And when you're planning these trips and working with hotels and airlines, different travel companies, do you find that it's easy to communicate with them and that they're accommodating, or do you hit a lot of roadblocks?
Airlines are pretty good.
Okay.
Airlines are good for the most part. Hotels, not so much. Hotels are really a pet peeve of mine and a thorn in my side. There's just no consistency. The definition of accessibility to the hotel industry is just all over the place.
Wow.
It's really bad. I just stayed in a hotel right before Christmas, the week before Christmas, and the room was terrible. I couldn't take a shower the next morning because I couldn't fit the wheelchair between the toilet and the shower, and the toilet shouldn't have even been there. It should have been next to the wall. It was just bad. And I figured it was one night. I wasn't going to complain, but I went up to the desk the next morning because I had a few minutes, and I said, I need to let you know about this room.
Yeah.
They should not advertise it as a fully accessible room with a roll-in shower because you can't get in the shower, and I just said, I just need you to know that because somebody's going to get really angry with you sometime.
Yeah.
And she said, just a minute. She came back and she said, there's no charge for the room. So that was nice because I didn't ask for it.
That is nice.
And I was very impressed, but I would have been more impressed if they had a proper room.
Well, it's kind of like what we talked about earlier. It's another thing that I guess from the people who are making that room are probably able-bodied, and they might not even realize like, okay, maybe once you're in the shower, it can be accessible, but what about actually getting into the shower? It's that
Exactly,
whole
George.
other
Yeah,
perspective that people
small
are
little
missing.
detail, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think all those little details are what makes it so important. So, I mean, you've been doing this for so long, years now. Has disability traveling, have you seen it improve over the years or?
Oh, of course, of
Okay.
course. Yeah, and especially in the cruise industry. The cruise
Mm-hmm.
industry is just phenomenal when it comes to accessibility and accommodation.
That's
And I
great.
wish the hotel industry would take a lesson from the cruise industry.
Yeah, hopefully they will. Maybe we can do
Uh,
something with that.
Maybe I've been trying. There's a lot of
Hmm.
people out there trying very hard.
Hmm.
I think one of the reasons that the hotel industry is not doing well is because somebody looks at the parent name,
Hmm.
Marriott, Hilton, etc. But what happens within those brands is that there's a lot of franchising and individual owners.
Okay.
And so I don't think there's one governing, you know, uh,
Yeah.
entity that's taking care of like accessibility. They're taking care of the brand in terms of, you got the same stuff, but they're not looking at accessibility overall. And whereas cruise ships, when they build a ship, they are all the same.
Wow. So they're
Hotels,
much more uniform with their policies and what they can, they almost
yeah,
have a definition for what accessibility is, whereas the
exactly. Well,
hotel industry has just not done that.
they have a whole department, access and compliance. And it's
Hmm.
interesting because ships typically are flown under foreign flag, which means they don't have to meet US standards
Hmm.
and they don't have to meet ADA. However, several years ago, they did say that if they docked in US ports, they did
Hmm.
have to follow, the US Department of Transportation.
Hmm.
So that's helped a lot. But I really feel that the cruise industry just realized it was good business and put their
Yeah.
money where their mouth is. Yeah.
Well, that's a whole another group of people that are now going to be able to go on those cruises and spend their money and help their business.
Well, I'll always tell somebody with a mobility challenge
Hmm.
that their best first choice for a successful vacation is a cruise. Because I know what they're going to encounter. I can pretty
Hmm.
much guarantee a great time.
Well, I mean, that's great. I used to go on cruises all the time when I was younger, and I loved them. So I'm glad that everyone is getting to enjoy them as much as I did. How would you kind of describe disabled traveling currently? And also, like, is there any like number one thing that you really think people need to know about or that needs to change right now?
Well, I speak a lot to groups of disabled people around the country in terms of educating them on how to travel
Hmm.
with special needs. And I think the number one thing is to teach people how to be proactive. That
Okay.
even if they are using an expert, it's still their responsibility to know about their equipment, and to be proactive, to ask for what they need. And I always try to tell people, you got to do this in a nice, kind way.
Yeah,
I think the kindness is so underrated and it's so important.
it
People
is.
will respond to you with a smile. If you smile,
Yeah, a
you know,
smile can get you a long way.
it really does. And I always tell people, excuse me, the last thing you pack is a smile and a good attitude. And I know, it's not always easy,
Yeah.
but it works so much better. And especially in today's environment where everybody's on edge and everybody's
Hmm.
frustrated, you know, take the extra time, get there really early.
Hmm.
I love sitting in airports and people watching,
I
you
do
know,
too. I go to airports pretty early. I'll go to like a cafe, get a coffee. It's pretty fun,
right.
nice. read my
Right.
book.
I don't mind that. It's, that's okay. And if it means it's going to make my experience a little easier, then it's totally worth it, right? Disabled people need to know their equipment, need to know how to tell the crew what to do with their equipment. It's just like disability when you go through TSA. You would not believe the number of different conditions that people can present with, and so much different equipment and things that they might have on their body for different purposes. And the same thing with mobility equipment. It's all different. You can't possibly expect everybody to know everything. So it's your responsibility as the traveler to be able to explain this and convey what needs to be done.
Yeah, I love that although there's a responsibility to other people being aware of disabled traveling and their needs, you yourself, like anyone else, need to be aware of like where you're going, how you're going to get there. It's just like being, like you said, proactive and taking care of yourself, honestly, making sure that your safety is number one.
Yeah. So I see part of my responsibility when somebody comes to me for a trip is to educate them on that.
Yeah. And then I guess my last kind of ending question is, what would you say to any disabled people watching or out there who are still just really apprehensive about it?
Call me. I'll help you. Let's get out there. And if not me, I mean, there's so much information, on the web now, on the internet. There's
so just call you or just Google and people can
Google. Yeah, Google's my best friend. Google and the guy from
I think it's everyone's.
Amazon. Amazon has made my life so much easier.
I think Amazon's made everyone's life easier. Well, that's all the questions I have for you today. Thank you so much for talking with me. This was seriously an amazing interview. I loved what you had to say. And just to anyone watching out there, just like Debra said, be kind, focus on other people, focus on yourself. And Debra, do you have any last thing to say?
No, thank you for the opportunity to help get the word out. I appreciate
Of course, you're welcome. So that's our episode of Deep Dive. Debra, thank you so much for being with me here today. And then tune in next time when we dive into something else.